Okay. All right, so a little bit about Markdown. Now, the developers at RStudio, again, I just really applaud these guys. So when we first do this, you're good to go. So I'm not going to change anything. Let me walk back through for those of you that were still sort of getting caught up. So if we go to File, New File, our Markdown, and it defaults to document. I just say my first document. I'll use the default HTML to start with. If it doesn't have your name, you could change your name here. Say OK. So once this comes up, you've got some options here to save the file. There's a spell check. You can search for things. Before I click this, I want you guys to see. So there's a little button up here. Oh, actually, let me back up. Does everybody say knit HTML? I'm just curious. Does it say that? Okay. If it doesn't, so there's under Tools, go to Global Options. And right here, remember how I said there's a lot of people started with a package called Sweave? So these options are still under, in the Global Options here, the link, or the tool menu says Sweave. And the first one up here, it says Program Defaults, anyway, it says Weave. You can ignore the R and W, but basically weaving files using, it should default to knitter, but you have the option for Sweave, so that's why I asked. It should just default to knitter. And then if you've got a LaTeX engine, this is some other stuff for that. But for right now, basically, if everybody says knitter, we're good to go. Okay. So before I even explain what's here, click the button that says knit HTML. Let's see if it works. Oh, and it is going to ask you to save the file. So, my first, whoops, and I can't type. Just save it somewhere on your computer that you'll remember. My first report. You don't have to give it an extension. It'll kind of do that for you, and we click Save. All right, I'll do it. Hold on, I'll do it one more time. So when this first gets kind of created, there's a button up here that says Knit HTML. And if we click on that, that should compile and run. I'm going to give you guys a second. Let me know if it didn't work, and I'll come around and check. Did that work? Yes! Woohoo! All right, awesome. Now, from here, it's kind of using a little miniature browser. You could officially open it in whatever your default browser is on your computer if you wanted to see what it would look like if and when you published it on the web. If you click this little button, which this is something maybe you guys could go home and play with. If you click on that, it's actually going to take you automatically to your RPubs account. So I have an account already set up on RPubs, and I encourage you guys to just play with this. It's completely free. Lots of people use it for different things, but there are tons of people that just use it for testing things out. So if you create a little free account, once you do that and you're logged in, then from inside RStudio, if I click Publish, it'll say RPubs is a free service. Note everything that you're doing is publicly visible. Just keep that in mind. And then you click Publish. And I'm already logged in, so it's going to, this is test report. You can give it a name. Click Continue, and there you go. And now you don't have to send the report to someone. You just send them the link. Oh, by the way, take a look at this. Isn't that awesome? All right, you guys obviously don't get as excited about this stuff as I do. It's early, it's Friday, I get it. Okay. All right, so now that we've done this, how the heck did we do it? Okay, so inside, this template is a really good one to learn off of and to just sort of hack around on. So obviously we've got some information up here at the top. What's between the dashes, so it starts with 3 dashes, it comes down here, and then we've got these things like title, what were the other things? Author, date. These are kind of the basics. Date and output. And in a minute, I'm going to have you guys knit this to Word. And so right now, it says the output is an HTML document. If I, instead of clicked knit HTML, if I, here on the little down arrow, if you click knit to Word, it's going to change that output to a Word document, which is kind of handy. But this piece at the beginning is something called YAML, YAML, which stands for yet another Markdown language. And there are some really neat things you can do with YAML to sort of set up. Matter of fact, for like some of those, like that Elsevier journal article and stuff, it has some pretty specific things behind it. And you can get kind of fancy with these things where, anybody in here ever heard of cascading style sheets? Which is a way to stylize a website. So you can create custom style sheets and then apply them and then reference them from in here. So this piece is actually doing a lot of things to drive how your document looks and feels. For right now, the basics actually work pretty well. So unless you want to, I would not recommend hacking around in there yet. Yeah. Right. So really what it's doing under the hood is it's actually reading that information, and then let me see, let me pull up the actual web page that I created, because I think for me, it dumped into my documents folder. So when it generates this HTML file, the words "my first document, Melinda Higgins, March 25th, 2016" is actually pulling from title, author, and date. And there's actually some cool things you can do with like abstracts, where the abstract actually gets embedded in this YAML header, and then it knows how to format an abstract in whatever document type format you're interested in. And I'm still sort of sorting through the best way to do that. But when this HTML file gets generated, a piece of it is actually coming from the information that's provided here. So. And when we'll have you guys do this here in a minute for the presentation format, and the information that's in here is actually your title slide. All right, so when we first generate, when we go new file, R Markdown, and we type this in, my first report, it's pulling your name from here. So like, I mean, even though I'm logged in, this is probably pulling from like when I registered the software, but I could call myself, you know, I'm trying to think. Who was this is just sad. Who's the princess in Frozen? Elsa. Thank you. But that's where this information is coming from. So you could change it. So I could be Princess Elsa here. And you can change the date. It by default puts in today's date, but if you were backdating or forward dating, you can change the date. Okay, so that's the first part. This next piece, and it puts this in by default. For right now, I recommend just leaving it. But what it's doing is it's embedding, this is the first little piece of R code. And the R code is highlighted with these little backticks. So on the keyboard, let's see, usually under the escape key, it's the key that has the tilde on top and then it has a little teeny backtick. So I'll leave this up here. Anyway, all right, so if you don't have that first part, it's okay. I think that's a slight difference in the different versions of R. But anything that's highlighted like that, and on my particular screen, it kind of shows it a little bit grayed out. Everything inside there are commands to R. So we'll ignore that one for right now. So hopefully the next piece starts with some text for you. Yours may not look exactly the same as mine. But these double tick marks, or sorry, double hash marks or pound signs, this says type the word R space markdown and make it a header level 2. So it's a way of basically indicating this is a header for this next section. And then I just start typing. You can actually put in real HTML code. So this is actually HTML code. This right here is markdown, where I'm saying take the word knit, and since I put 2 little asterisks on either side, that says make the word knit in bold. And then this piece here is R code. The actual R code, and I'm going to put a space, is this one right here that says summary cars. And so this is a little like when we were in the R script window where you could highlight a piece of R code and run it. You can do that inside of this window as well. So from here, if I said either on the end of the line or I could highlight it, over here I still have the options to run commands. So if I click run, just ignore the error. But if I run that, then I actually get the summary of this little data set. And it gives me the min, the max, the median, the mean, and the quartiles. And it only has 2 variables. So it's pretty straightforward. So that's really what it's doing. And then we were seeing that in that output file. The other piece here, at a minimum, the only thing you have to have is the letter R, which says this is a code chunk, and it has the letter R in there letting me know this is R code. Because it turns out if you're doing generic markdown, you could embed C code, you could embed Python code. There's a whole bunch of things you could do. This is the one that works for R. And then I gave it a name. And this becomes important later on. You don't have to name these, but it's a good idea to do so. Simply because this is almost like if you're working with different files. So imagine I had a batch file and I said, or like those of you that have or are writing your dissertation, you probably have your dissertations in different, like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, stuff like that. And maybe you have, for say, chapter 1's probably your background, but maybe chapter 3 and chapter 4, you maybe have data sets that go with those that say, this is everything that went to doing the data summary. This is the stuff that went to the files for AIM 1. These are the analysis files for AIM 2. So it's kind of like that, except I'm putting it all together. So what this is saying is, this is the code chunk, and I'm going to call it cars, because all I'm doing is summarizing cars. So you put a space and you give it a name. So that's what that means. You can include these plots. So it actually goes and makes this plot of pressure. It's another built-in data set. So if I click run, you can kind of see what the plot looks like. And that's the plot that gets embedded in our document. And I gave it a name pressure, but then there's another little piece that shows up here. This is a code chunk option. So what this does, you put a comma and you say echo equals false. So echo means, do you want me to show this or not? So this is kind of like hide. If I say echo equals true, which is the default, it'll echo it back to the document. It'll actually show you the code. If I don't want this code to show up in my final document, then I just set that to false. So it'll run it, make the plot, and it looks all nice and clean, but there's code hidden behind it. So this is kind of the whole idea behind reproducible research. It's not just that you can reproduce my results, but I can see how you got those results. And I think this is a really good thing in the long run, simply because, I am more than willing to be wrong. If I run an analysis and made a mistake somewhere, I would much prefer for somebody to find it and go ahead and let's get it fixed. So this is another way for me to be able to put this out there, and maybe it's not on the web, maybe it's just to my research team to say, please take a look at this, or I could send it to Sudeshna or Brian, and say, go through this and look and see if I have any errors. Yeah, Blake, Andy. Oh, it's just this This is just the default data set. They're just showing you different examples. So cars is a built-in data set, pressure is a built-in data set. So I could have just as easily said plot cars, which, oh, okay, all right. So they kind of keep updating the defaults. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so without, and I may not know this exactly, I kind of like the fact that some of this is a black box even to me. It's generating the plot, so there's an actual file that gets generated, then on the fly it's creating the HTML code to tell it where to go find that plot, then embed that image in the final document. Yeah, that's just this is just a name for this piece of code, and you could, yeah, or you could go back if you're debugging. This one's working, but this window here, and it kind of ran, and I didn't say anything about it. So when it actually starts processing, it runs through, and it says, okay, the first part's ordinary R code, it looks fine, label, setup, it has some options. Goes through some more ordinary text. Here's one where it says label cars. So if I got an error right here, then I would know that that error occurred in the R code, in the R code chunk I called cars. You don't have to name them, but trust me, if you have a really big file, it's nice. So it's almost like a little miniature header just to you for tracking which piece of R code broke. So it's a good idea, just even if you called them, chunk 1, chunk 2, chunk 3, just give it a name so you can go back and remember what happened. This particular file has some information. It says, notice that echo equals false parameter was added. Okay. So now that we have this, and I'm going to tell you what, I'll make this look a little bit more like y'all's, and I'm going to just change this to cars plot since you guys have the cars summary and then the cars plot. I'll just put that in there. Instead of knitting to HTML, this time let's try knitting to Word. And it'll ask you, please save the file, my first report. Or if it may not ask you to save the file, it did for me because I think I deleted it and started over. And click run. Do you want to overwrite it? Yes. Because I recreated it. And assuming you don't get any errors, you should now have an Microsoft Word document. So, and if I bring this actually up in the Word editor, so, and I'll turn off the little paragraph marks because it gets kind of hard to look at. So you get a title, you get your author name, date, and it looks very, very similar. But the awesome thing is you're now in Microsoft Word. You can do all the usual things you do in Microsoft Word. No, it just shows you the R command that generated that plot. So yes, you're right. Yeah, it's not showing you the sausage making. Exactly. Not really. The only way to really kind of see what's going on is looking through this log file that tells you what it's doing. And so like this part here that just kind of looks like, it really does look like Russian, but it's basically running pandoc. Remember I mentioned, so you used to have to do this by hand. So it's doing it for you. There's a bunch of pandoc commands. It's actually going from this R markdown file. It's creating a plain markdown file, and then it's converting it to a Microsoft doc file with all of these options. So the beauty of this is the sausage making that you don't have to learn anymore. Yes. So at the top where it says knit Word, you have these options. You can either change it to knit to HTML, which is where we started, or if you click knit to Word. And when you do that, it just sort of does it for you, but if you'll notice, if you scroll back up to the top, it's now changed it where the output, instead of being HTML, is now Word document. All right, you guys want to try one more? Okay. So we'll leave this one up. Let's try another one. Let's say File, New File, R Markdown. And this time, instead of a document, and by the way, when you do this the first time, you don't have to start with HTML. You could start right here and just go ahead and set this up to go to Microsoft Word. So anyway, you can do it from here, and it'll automatically create it with the output for Word document. But let's try a presentation. So let's say my first presentation. I'm still in there as Princess Elsa. Can't wait to show this to my son tonight and go, I was talking about you and Frozen. He always likes it when I talk about him in lectures. He's like, did you talk about me in class today? And we'll just use the first one, which is the default output format for HTML, the IO slides. I kind of like them. If you want, we can go back and make one in this slidey format. We're going to skip Beamer. But just use the default to start with and say OK. Again, yours may not look exactly like mine just because I think some of the things have been updated. And by the way, I'm running, let's see, I'm running RStudio 99.878. I think there's a new version that's out too, so y'all's may be slightly different. So it looks very, very similar, right? We've got a title, we've got an author, we've got a date, and this time the output is IO slides presentation. So that's the output format. Very, very similar. We have a header. This time the header, this will actually be the title of the slide. And then I have some text. Here is another slide with bullets. And so if you remember when I had up the Markdown quick reference, one of the options here was, let's see where to go, was for ordered lists. And you can do these either with asterisks or in this case, like the example they're showing here is with dashes. So there's some other symbols that you can use to indicate a bullet or an item in your list. Here's another slide with our output. So in this case, this is where we did that summary of the CARS data set, and it went ahead and said echoed it true. So we're actually going to show the code on the slide in addition to the output from the summary of the CARS data set. And then it's got one more slide here with a plot. And since you guys probably don't have that one, I'm just going to say CARS plot. And I'm going to tell it to give me a plot of the CARS data set. And did y'all's at least look similar to this? Maybe not identical? Similar? Okay. Yes, question? It's creating a new slide. Exactly. So every time it sees a new header, it creates a new slide. And I've played with this some. At the end of the day, if I really am developing a presentation, I'm still going to make it in PowerPoint. Haven't quite figured out the mojo to go between this and PowerPoint. That part's not, there's no connection yet, like there is with Microsoft Word. But, you know, if I can actually get this going, it's easy enough to save these out as like images and then just bring the image into my PowerPoint slide. So like I could use this to develop whatever the graphics or the tables that I'm generating from my data and my analysis, save those, and then just import it later into PowerPoint. I have a feeling there's development going on in that arena, but admittedly, trying to get things to work with some of the Microsoft products is challenging because one of the reasons things look so pretty is there's a ton of stuff going on under the hood to make them look pretty. So if we do this, we can actually knit to HTML. I'm trying to see, yeah, there's a couple of different options, but we'll just do the knit HTML piece, and it'll ask you to save it. My first presentation, and you can call it whatever you want, and say save. It should open in a browser-like window. It opened where I was in the file, but this is the beginning of the file. So remember how I said that header information here? So it's pulling title, author, and date out of that little intro piece from the YAML header and generating this first slide, the title slide. And then this next piece is just basically text, and it happens to have an HTML link. You could actually click on this. Matter of fact, if this is working for you guys, if you click on the rmarkdown.rstudio.com link, This is a fantastic place to get more information. There's a quick tour, and I encourage you guys to flip through this. This is a good way to get a better, maybe even more thorough overview and intro than what I'm doing today. All right, so here are the slides, and it numbers them for you. I don't know if you guys can see it, but there's a little number down at the bottom. It says 3 of 5. I was in somebody's presentation one time, and they had 3 of 10,000. People just started laughing. All right. Here's the slide with the R output. I mean, you guys are getting the idea. Here's the plot. So anything and everything that we do in R, we can now basically have this exported out and presented in a format that's easy enough to work with our team members, especially going into Microsoft Word. All right, so I'm going to close that one. Any questions?